So I want to introduce Mr. Dennis Vodko. He's going to talk about a fact pattern of a real case. He's highly experienced in criminal and civil matters. And it's so my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce the former United States, New York State Attorney General Dennis Vacco, and he was also a former United States attorney right here in the Western District of New York. He's currently a partner with Lippis Mathias and serves on the firm's executive committee. He has a great deal of experience in this space, and we'll discuss an actual example. Dennis.
Holly, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction, and I certainly enjoyed listening to your remarks. I just lament that as we were preparing for this, that we didn't have our IT folks use some AI to make me look like Tom Cruise. But in any event, it's a pleasure to be here. Good morning to all of the participants. Thanks for joining us. As Holly mentioned, I always say that my DNA, despite nearly 15 years now at Lippis Mathias, my DNA is in law enforcement. Spent 20 years as a prosecutor, as Holly mentioned, as the United States Attorney of the Western District of New York, and also the Attorney General of New York State back in the 90s. So when I approach problems, and in that vein, I head up the firm's corporate and government investigations practice team. So I always look at things through the lens of my DNA, my professional DNA, which is that of a former state and federal prosecutor. Holly and John, even in the statistics that John raised, do a great job of framing this problem. I want to spend a few moments talking about some of our experiences here at Lippis Mathias, real life losses, if you will, real life intrusions perpetrated by cyber criminals. We've seen in our experience, the cybercrime comes in a variety of different forms. So that's kind of the catch-all phrase for whether it's ransomware. We see oftentimes the target is payrolls. Obviously, always implicated or usually implicated are emails, and typically, as I think that the consumers, the businesses that are involved in using the internet for B2B purposes are becoming more sophisticated. But as businesses become more sophisticated and the tools to thwart cybercrime become more sophisticated, the criminals become more sophisticated as well. The bad guys typically, seemingly, are at least even with the latest preventative measures, if not a step or two ahead. In our experience, just a couple of high-level examples, but I want to talk about a very specific one. We've represented a company that had a contract with the state of Texas to provide during the COVID pandemic personal protective equipment. It was a multi-million-dollar contract. The state paid on a monthly basis. The government is typically a good payer, maybe a little bit slow at the outset, but eventually the government is typically a good payer. And the state of Texas was regularly, routinely making payments, six-figure payments on a monthly basis to this company that was located out in California. We were representing the company on its general business relationships. When they finally called us to say, hey, we've recognized that the state is in arrears, which is somewhat odd because they're good payers, and they're in arrears for 3 months, so nearly $1 million of arrearage owed to this company for product that had already been delivered. As we drilled down on it and we dug into the circumstances, we discovered that there was a cyber criminal who somehow got in the middle of all of these communications and transactions, and was able to divert on a monthly basis more than $300,000 for 3 months from an account controlled by the state of Texas, to divert that money to a bank turned out to be a bank in Utah, if my memory serves me correctly, and then the money disappeared. And I raised that only because in that chain, it wasn't just a B2B situation. It wasn't two private sector entities that were being victimized. It was a state government, one of the largest states, and presumably a very sophisticated state from a systems perspective, that was victimized here. We've seen companies who have come to us because a weekly payroll run has been stolen through um, uh, an infection of their system through some cyber attack. Obviously, as Holly mentioned, the ransomware issue is always very prevalent, and we've actually seen that occur, frankly, in the middle of closing a transaction where the database of the seller was attacked with a ransomware attack. And fortunately, it didn't thwart the transaction, but it certainly delayed it until the ransomware issue had been resolved. I've been affiliated with Wire Vault and Credit Vault for actually probably going on 5 years. I think it's important to say that I'm not just an attorney who advises the company. I sit on the board of directors, and I'm an investor because I believe in this product and I believe in the efficacy of this product. And I look at it from the perspective principally as a partner in a large law firm, because I recognize that in the chain of liability here, not only potentially are the banks, but also law firms as well. As a matter of fact, right here in Western New York, there's an ongoing lawsuit right now against a significant and well-known Buffalo law firm for their alleged role in a cyber attack that caused the diversion of $10 million. I want to spend just a few minutes here describing what really precipitated at a March of 2023 strategy session that John Gavigan had called to sit around the table and noodle how we can better use the blockchain technology that was being developed by Credit Vault. I was just at that point in time in the midst of representing a Tel Aviv law firm. Just parenthetically, my law firm has a cross-border practice that extends to Israel, and I had been retained by this Tel Aviv law firm that was representing an investor in Israel who intended to make a acquisition of a development project to join it as a joint venture participant in a development project in South Florida. The contract between the Israeli investor and the South Florida developer required the payment of $5 million to consummate the deal. Sophisticated law firms on both ends. The Israeli law firm, very sophisticated, an M&A firm, well regarded in the Israeli legal community, and a similar postured, similar law firm reputationally in South Florida. The deal was consummated. The wire came from an Israeli bank to a bank in New Jersey, where it was going to be held until the day of closing. And then upon the day of closing, the wire was then going to be made to a Bank of America branch in South Florida, which was the bank of the bank that the developer wanted the money sent to. $5 million was at stake. At closing, $4,250,000 was wired from Tel Aviv to the New Jersey bank. Unbeknownst to all of the participants at that point in time, at the time of the closing, the money never made it from the New Jersey bank to Bank of America. 2 weeks passed, and the law firm in South Florida now reaches out to who became our eventual clients, the law firm in Tel Aviv, to say, hey, we're wondering where the $4.25 million is. And they showed that they had the wire receipt, that the money was transferred from Tel Aviv to the New Jersey bank. And then they had the New Jersey bank reveal that the money was sent to a bank in Delaware. Well, that was the first hint that something was awry. because the bank in Delaware had no nexus to anybody in the deal except for the cyber criminals. After the initial 4.25 was sent, another 750 was also sent, and I forgot exactly why the payment was bifurcated in that fashion. Fortunately, we were able to contact the bank in Delaware, who still curiously held the 750, even though that money was in that account for about 2 weeks by the time that we reached out to the bank in Delaware. At the end of the day, um, the Israeli law firm is now being scrutinized for liability by their client. The business partner in South Florida is now looking at the Israeli for possible legal action because he didn't get his $5 million. But the banks, so I was happy that John described briefly at the beginning of the presentation, the fact that maybe there might be some effort now in Congress to, bolster or improve the bank's responsibility here, banks in general, and potentially their liability as well, because what we encountered from both banks, the New Jersey bank and the Delaware bank, they essentially took the position, it's not our problem. That we have no liability here. We certainly don't have any liability to the Tel Aviv law firm. Their insurance didn't kick in, and their ability to make the transaction whole was impossible. The Tel Aviv law firm had a modicum of insurance that covered some of the loss, but not all of the loss. They were eventually sued in Israel by their client for the differential. And I think that's again important point to make here for the lawyers that are on the call. We do see increasingly evidence that law firms that are in the middle of these wire transactions are becoming being held liable. At Lippis Mathias, we have a very large M&A shop. We do an awful lot of transactions, and I think that the exposure that we have by virtue of the so many commercial transactions that we're in the middle of, literally oftentimes worth millions upon millions, if not, tens of millions of dollars or more, that there's a great deal of exposure. So all of this was sort of the backdrop. It was indeed the backdrop of that skull session, that planning session that we had back in March of 2023, when sort of the light bulb went off in everybody's minds that we could offer a product that at the end of the day will better secure the wire transfers by simply having better systems. Holly mentioned spreadsheets that are stored on your computer are easily hacked as well. Emails. It's mind-boggling to me how easy it is to hack an email and how easy it is for a participant in an email chain to not recognize that the email has been hacked, because typically they're just not thinking along those lines. The last thing that I want to say about this is that oftentimes, and we see it even here at Lippis, although now as a client of Wire Vault, we're trying to improve our systems. But for as many lawyers that we have that are involved in wire transfers, that's how many different schemes, if you will, or how many different plans that we used to employ to verify wire transfer information. What Wire Vault does, it standardizes the flow of information, standardizes the process, it provides the multi-factor authentication, and while there's no absolute guarantee, Wire Vault, in my estimation, is a gigantic leap forward, if you will, to protect the wire transfers themselves and the commercial interest on both sides of a prospective commercial transaction.